Hello everyone, welcome to my Flosstube channel. I am Antonia Florence and I love cross stitching and I love stitching in general and I love all crafty things. So while this video is going to be focused mostly on stitching projects, just know that I am a multi-crafter and I love all kinds of crafty things and I consider myself a maker of many things. So I am so happy that you're here and I would like to wish everyone a wonderful start to the Memorial Day weekend if you are in the US. In the US, it's just the official kickoff for summer for us, and it's a really nice long weekend and it is the perfect time to get some stitching in. And what I'm going to share in today's video, the focus is going to be on summer stitching and summer stitching projects. I'm going to share some finishes, some works in progress, as well as some ideas that I have that I want to work on for summer stitching. And then towards the end, I will share a stitchy story time, another Stitchwick Hollow series. This one will be called the Summer Stitch Book, and we'll kind of join the crazy crew from Stitchwick Hollow and see what they're up to this summer. And then there'll be a little bonus FFO at the end of the video where I'm going to show you a set of matching gifts that I made for my mom and me. That's very special to me. So with that, I'd like to start with a finish. So I have a summer finish, and it is this project right here. Let me just get that in view. And this is the summer cross stitch from the Tiny Town series. And I'll get the exact name in a second. I just want you to see how adorable this little scene is. I love all of the Tiny Town scenes. I think I have almost all of them, and I've stitched a bunch of them. I finished one, fully finished. So I have a fully finished one for Halloween, and then I have a couple of finishes, this being one of them. And let me get the chart for this one and I'll tell you a little bit about it. So this is the Seaside Tiny Town, and let me try to get that in there without hiding my face. I think this came out 2 years ago, and I think I finished this probably in the summer of 23. And I just love the little motifs on it, and I love that the little crab here, I don't know if you can see that, but he has some little beads in his eyes for eyes, and then let's see, there are beads in a couple other spots as well. Might just be, is it just the crab's eyes that have beads? Let me check. I thought there were more beads, but maybe that's all. I think that's all. But anyway, it's still, I love it. I'm trying to figure out how to finish it completely. I would really like to try to make it into the drum that's on the pattern cover. So I might try to look up a tutorial for that and then do my first drum. I've never done a finished object in cross stitch as a drum, or any object for that matter. So that would be kind of a new finish for me. So I just love that. I love the lighthouse. I love the little pelican over here. I just love the colors. I think I used all of the called for floss as well as the fabric. So this is on 32 count. Let's see if I have I don't have the little, I don't know what fabric it is anymore, but it's definitely 32 count and it's definitely a linen. So there we have it. We have our little Seaside Tiny Town. So next I have a couple of other Tiny Town finishes that I'll show you. So this one is the Christmas Tiny Town, and I think I would like to make this one into a drum as well. And this is also on 32 count. I think this might be Platinum Lugana. Let's just look at that closely. And this one also had some bead embellishments on it. We have a little snowflake there. We also have the wreath. The little berries on the wreath are, no wait, berries on the wreath are not beads. Sorry about that. I guess I'll just have to feel it. Oh, maybe the only, I misspoke. The only beads are these little snowflakes here. So we have one there, one here, and one here. And I just love the colors. I love little reindeer like peeking out from the house over here. I love the little Christmas trees and the candy canes. It's just so magical. And what I really love about the little tiny towns or cross-stitching buildings in general, I find that I have an affinity for that. I feel like I just get transported into the little magical world as I'm stitching it, and it just makes me so happy and so relaxed. And I don't know, I just feel like I become a part of the little fantasy world I'm stitching. So I have another tiny town almost finished. So, and all the tiny towns are by heart and hand. So this is the pattern. Let me see if I can show that without getting glare. Let's see. There we go. So this is the pattern. And again, it has like an example of a little drum on the front. So maybe I'll make another drum with this one. So for this one, I think I'm mostly finished. I think there are a couple of areas throughout like where I need to add some details. So I need to add like over here, the heart, it has a little arrow through it. So I need to add that. I also need to add, there are some little beads that go along with it, some little heart decorations. And this is also on 32 count, and I use the called for fabric for this, which is, let's see. Actually, I might not have used the called for fabric for that. I'm sorry. I think I used, it's a 32 count, but it's a pink, a light pink fabric. It's Lugana. That's kind of all I remember about that. Now I finished this one probably about a year ago, or almost finished it. I still need to do the detail work and add some of the little beads. But again, it's just, I just love how magical the little world is. I love the little heart clouds, and I love the flag on the building over here. It's just so, so cute. So this is the Halloween tiny town. So this is the only tiny town that I fully finished, and this is actually the first tiny town that I stitched. And then I also have a little addition to it, which I hope to do this year and make like a little ornament just like is shown here on the pattern cover. I think this is gonna be so cute. So my next tiny town projects that I have, that they may be things that I start this summer as I'm thinking of my summer stitching plans. I have the Frosty tiny town. Get rid of that glare for some reason. And this one, I may start this one in July for just Christmas in July. And I also bought the additional, the little frill, like the little extra that goes with it, so that I could stitch both of them. And I'm thinking of maybe making it a longer piece and just adding this snowman to the end of this scene, and then maybe also having a standalone ornament. But I just think he would look so, so cute if he's also like part of the scene here. So we have, let's see. So we have the snowman on this end, and then maybe I would put him like right over here, right next to that house. Let's try to get a sense of, that might work, we'll see. And for the Frosty tiny town, I also got the called for floss. It's a fancy floss, Weeks Dye Works, and I got all the called for colors. I love the fancy flosses. I like DMC too, but I like the surprise that you get when you're stitching with the variegated threads, because I just love how the tone tends to shift as you're stitching. One more set of tiny towns that I've purchased. I have the tiny town Anytown, which is just so cute. It has like a little bookstore, and a flower store, a little cafe, a little keepsake store, and then an ice cream stand at the end. And I just think that's so cute. I can just imagine myself just getting transported into this like magical little town and like going for an ice cream and then heading over to the bookstore and maybe picking up some flowers on the way home to just, you know, put on my dining room table, make that house look all kind of fresh and pretty. So yeah, I definitely think that's why I love stitching these tiny towns, because it's just the fantasy aspect of getting lost in the little world. And then I also have the More Any Tiny Town. And again, this one, so cute. So there's a little pizzeria, there is a toy store, and then let's see, what are those others? Then there's a market and a little theater. And it looks like that is a little church there. And again, just so cute. So I definitely I love like stitching little towns and little buildings. And I think I've had that love always. So when I was in my watercolor era during COVID, I also loved to like watercolor and create like little fantasy little buildings. So I'll show you a couple. So I started painting things that I knew. So for a long time, I lived in New York City. I lived there for about 15 years until 2014. And one of my favorite places to go when I just want to have a little relaxing afternoon on my own, or sometimes if I had a friend in town, I would take them there. It was this little tea shop in the West Village called Tea and Sympathy. And so one of my watercolor projects was to kind of recreate the little building where Tea and Sympathy was. And it has this green and white awning, and then in the front they have two windows that kind of stick out, and there are little tables. Like the best tables in the tea shop is a tiny tea shop that maybe had about 5 or 6 tables. It could fit maybe 30 people max, and they had these little round tables up front where you could sit and have your tea and sit in the window and look out on the street and watch everyone walk by and have your tea and your scones, and if you wanted, you get little finger sandwiches. And it was just it's one of my favorite places. It's still there, and whenever I visit New York City, I will go in there and do my best to try to get like one of the seats in the window. So after I spent some time like stitching things that I knew, so I'll show you one more thing of a building that I knew. So this was a townhouse that was near where I live that I just always loved. I used to, again, like with the fantasies, like just imagining what it would be like to live in this beautiful little townhouse, walking up the stairs and hosting like a Thanksgiving dinner or something, like in one of these rooms that face out onto the street. Just again, another building I loved. And then I started creating my little fantasy world. So this is one of them. So I kind of came up with this little doggy daycare center called Barkingham Palace. And we have like all the little doggies. They're there, they're kind of looking out at the window at everyone. And I don't know, just love it. Again, I love creating and just getting like transported into the little fantasy world there. So that's that. So back to stitching. So next, what I want to share, yes, I want to talk about summer projects. So for my summer stitching, and in particular for the month of June, because I think July I want to dedicate it to Christmas in July, and then August, of course, will be the getting ready for Halloween and all the fall stitching. And then after that, it's pretty much just seasonal stitching through the end of the year. So June is kind of, for me at least, the last month where it's really, there's an opportunity to work on summer themed projects, or maybe, you know, projects that don't have a seasonal theme. So my ideas for what I might work on in June are, I have this one chart from Hands On Design, and it's called Beach Please. Wait, sorry about the glare today. And it's called Beach Please. And I have the fabric, and I also bought all of the threads, so it's all ready to go. I guess it's all kitted up and and ready to go. So this would be an easy one to start. And what really appeals to me about it is I think this would be a good like weeknight stitching project because it just, each of the little motifs are so small. So I could be like, okay, I'm just going to sit down for a half hour or so and maybe do one of the little motifs. And if that's all that I have time to get done, at least I'll feel like I have accomplished something. So I think this is like a perfect like evening stitching project when you don't have that much time. Then I have another summer chart, also by Hands On Design, and this one is called More Beach. And I haven't stitched something that had so much text on it yet, and that is kind of appealing to me because I really enjoy stitching text, and I think that this would also be really nice to frame and then just hang up during the summer, just to kind of get into the summer beachy spirit. And I have the floss and I have the fabric for this also. I just think it's so cute. So help me decide in the comments, like, should I work on Beach Please, or should I work on More Beach in June, or should I do both of them and just juggle them? Let me know what you think. I'd love for some guidance here. And then some other ideas that I have for summer stitching. I've been really getting into samplers lately, so I haven't stitched a sampler yet. That's one thing I haven't done, and I've been reading a lot about the history of samplers, and I really want to make my own, and I want to hang it up in my stitching room so that I have it. So I'd like to know from any of you out there, like, what do you recommend for a first sampler? Would it be good to, I guess it probably makes sense to try one of the modern charts instead of trying to go back and get one of the older charts from like the 1800s or so. So I have some ideas. I went to 1-2-3 Stitch today and I put some on my wish list. The ones that I'm kind of looking at, one is the Snooty Parrot sampler by Barbara Ann Designs. That one's kind of big, and it's also a little bit busy, and I have another big project that I'm working on. I'm working on the Big City Christmas that I'm hoping to finish by this season, and that's a really large project. So I'm wondering if maybe I should look for a smaller sampler if I'm going to actually like try to do a sampler this year. And then the other one that I really like is the Equality sampler by Plum Street Samplers. And then another one that I like is the Sampler Lesson 1 by Plum Street Samplers. And then those are the three I'm kind of torn between. I was also looking at the Salem sampler, which really appealed to me, but I think that the concern that I have with that one is that I already have so many Halloween themed projects, and there's only a limited amount of time that you can display your Halloween or fall themed projects during the year. So I feel like maybe I should try something that's a little bit that isn't really attached to a season so that I can keep it up all year. So that's kind of what I'm struggling with. And if you have any other thoughts for like what a good beginner sampler would be to start on, please leave them in the comments. And then the other idea that I have, so in addition to I have my summer charts, I have this idea that maybe I want to do a sampler. Another idea I've been toying with is going back to some other stitching type projects that I started years ago and haven't finished. So for example, I have a Cricut loom. I like to weave. I like to do beading. I like to make bracelets. I like to sew. I like to make, I'll show you some of the things I like to sew, especially in the summer. So I love making little napkins, like cloth napkins. Let's see if you can see all this. So this is probably like 16 by 16, I would say, and it's Liberty of London cotton on the front, and then just muslin on the back. and then it's hand stitched. Let's see if I can show this so you can see. And then it's the edges are hand stitched, and I use pearl cotton there. And what I like about this project is sometimes, you just want to, I love ironing and I love like stitching when I don't really have to think about it. And this is a great project because there's a lot of ironing involved and the stitching is really simple. And then at the end, you get the joy of just sitting down and just hand stitching all around the edges. And it's just really rewarding to me for whatever reasons. I just enjoy, this is a project that I enjoy making over and over again. And what I like about it is you can use all different fabrics for it. Some other versions that I've done in Liberty of London fabric on one side and then just the muslin on the other. And what I like to do with these are I like to make a bunch of them, and then as a gift, as like a little housewarming gift, or maybe if I ever go to a stitching retreat, a little table mate gift, just, kind of fold up maybe 4 of them and put like a real pretty ribbon around it and give it as a gift. So I think that these make such a nice gift. And the way that I do it usually is I'll choose like complementary fabrics. So they'll all be, if I give a set of 6, then there'll be 3 different patterns that complement each other, so that I don't know, I just think it adds to the whimsy instead of having like 6 of all the same thing. So that's a project that I really enjoy doing in the summer. So one idea is to try to, use up some of the fabric that I've bought over the years to make all these napkins, to actually start getting through some of that and finish some of them. I also have some beading projects that have just been sitting. Some have been sitting for 10 years, and that might be a good area to start working on again. So that's kind of where I am. And with that, so now I would like to share another story with you from Stitchwick Hollow. This one is called The Summer Stitch Book, and it is a fun little set of stories, all set in summer, and all the little zany characters that you love and a couple new ones. And I am going to stitch along with you, and I hope that you join me and you get a cup of something cool or a cup of something warm and just stitch your favorite project and just get lost in the fantasy world of Stitchwick Hollow with me. And I will demonstrate some summer projects while I'm narrating the tale. So if you're into that, then let's start stitching together or working together on projects and hang out and listen to the story. And if you're here more for the projects, then just you can jump ahead a bit and just meet me at the end, where I am going to share a very special set of FFOs that I made for me and my mom. See you soon.
Stitchwick Hollow, The Summer Stitch Book. Chapter 1, The Great Stitchwick Picnic Panic. The summer sun spilled like warm butter across the cobblestones of Stitchwick Hollow. Bees hummed, banners fluttered, and the village green brimmed with folding chairs, picnic baskets, and embroidery hoops of every imaginable size. The annual summer picnic and stitch showcase had begun. Enter Granny Zip. She arrived in a rumble of engine growl and floral exhaust. Her motorcycle, a fire-engine red beast named Gertrude, popped up dust clouds as it rolled to a halt beside the potato salad table. Granny Zip dismounted in one smooth motion, leather vest flapping in the breeze. Her helmet gleamed beneath stitched patches. Kiss my bobbin, thread warrior, and in stitches since 65. She squinted at the spread with suspicion, as though a deviled egg might leap off the tray and cause a scene. Then she pulled a clipboard from her satchel. "Watermelon integrity test," she muttered, brandishing a tiny crochet hook like a stylus. "Step 1, thumb test." Thump, thump, thump. "Too soft. Suspect." Mrs. Penelope Willoughby, steward of fruit-based traditions, gave an offended gasp. "That melon came from my garden, Zip." Granny Zip peered over her tinted glasses. "Then your garden's got a soft underbelly, Penelope, and I don't trust fruit that doesn't bite back." With a grunt of satisfaction, she scribbled a note. "Onward. Lemonade Patrol." As she moved down the line of refreshments, a small child named Marvin followed behind her, wide-eyed and solemn. He was today's honorary deputy threadkeeper, complete with a badge fashioned from a plastic canvas coaster and far too much glitter glue. "Ma'am," Marvin whispered, tugging at her vest, "should we interrogate the coleslaw?" "That's the spirit, deputy," she replied. "But first, we sniff the lemonade for fizz fraud." Nearby, Delia Buttonwillow and Imogene Crispin looked up from their picnic basket, already mid-project, exchanging bemused glances. "How many years has she done this now?" Imogene asked. 7, Delilah said. 8 if you count the year she declared war on the ants and accidentally blew up the scone tent. They paused as Granny clinked her glass dramatically, took a sip of lemonade, and immediately spit it into the grass with a scandalized gasp. "Carbonated," she bellowed. "Penelope, are you trying to poison the entire village with soda pop masquerading as lemonade?" "It's sparkling," Penelope hissed. "It's European." Granny Zip made the sign of the cross with her crochet hook. The Stitchwick summer picnic was officially underway. The bunting fluttered, the lemonade sparkled, the bees swarmed. It began with a single scream from the dessert table. "My meringue!" shrieked Petunia Frimble, standing frozen as a column of ants marched confidently up the leg of the table and directly into her famed lemon fluff. Across the green, Calvin Freyweather paused mid-bite of his cucumber sandwich and squinted. Are those ants forming letters?" Granny Zip, still astride her cherry-red motorcycle Gertrude, which now bore a sun hat over the handlebars and a stitch sign reading Official Picnic Patrol, narrowed her eyes. "This is no ordinary infestation," she muttered. "That's tactical. That's sabotage." Nearby, a suspicious fizz erupted from the lemonade dispensers. A hissing geyser of pink foam sprayed skyward and doused the cross-stitch display of Hazel Plimpton, who had just arranged her hoop stand into a delicate fan of hydrangea-themed samplers. "My hydrangeas!" Hazel gasped, lifting a soggy hoop. They look like sea urchins." Then came the buzzing. At first, it was faint, like a lazy summer hum, but it grew louder, angrier. A flock of bees zigzagged towards the refreshments, drawn by what someone later described as a suspiciously honey-forward trifle. Rufus, the tourist who had wandered into town looking for a bicycle repair, dove under a folding chair with a startled yelp. "Is this part of the entertainment?" Granny Zip kicked up her kickstand and stood tall on her pegs. "Not on my thread-spangled watch." She pulled from her saddlebag a small stitch sash reading Picnic Protector and whipped it around her torso like a general preparing for battle. "Calvin, grab the citronella candles. Hazel, bring the fly swatter wreath. Rufus, stop crying. You're drafted." I don't even live here." "Then consider this your honorary citizenship trial." The bees surged. The ants rallied. Somewhere in the distance, someone's dog had run off with a deviled egg tray. The picnic was unraveling faster than a poorly secured French knot. But Granny Zip? She revved Gertrude and grinned. "Stitchers, mount up. It's time to protect the picnic." Marvin, clutching a spatula like a sword, saluted. "Yes, ma'am." Hazel, apron askew, waved a citronella candle like a torch. Calvin, reluctantly, picked up an embroidered banner pole and muttered, "I should have stayed home and alphabetized my floss." Granny Zip beamed. "That's the spirit. Now, forward, brave stitchers. This picnic won't save itself." Operation Picnic Rescue was chaotic from the first stitch. Hazel attempted to fan the bees away with her fly swatter wreath, only to whirl directly into a paper plate tower, sending egg salad frisbees airborne. "Duck!" yelled Calvin. "No, not the quiche. Duck!" Marvin charged valiantly into the ant line with a mason jar lid and a half-eaten cracker. "I'll draw them off with carbs." Rufus, now roped into citronella duty, darted between tables like a confused bee himself, trailing wax and panic. "The bees aren't responding to the citronella," he shouted. Granny Zip, unflinching in the eye of the picnic storm, barked orders like a cross between a general and a carnival baker. "Hazel, hold the line. Calvin, Less flailing, more wafting. Marvin, you glorious goblin, bait them toward the jam tarts. Somehow, the team began to sync up. Calvin's banner pole caught a rogue bee mid-flight, accidentally heroic. Hazel constructed a citronella perimeter around the punch bowl, and Marvin's cracker decoy plan actually worked, if only temporarily. Granny Zip adjusted her vest, nodded at the mayhem like a satisfied artisan, and announced, "That's phase 1 complete. Next up, bee diplomacy." Granny Zip marched over to the hive-shaped cake centerpiece and cleared her throat. "All right, my little buzzsaws," she declared. "Let's talk terms." She held out a ramekin of honey with theatrical reverence. "We offer a peace trifle, a goodwill glob. We recognize your industriousness, your pollination skills, and your rightful disdain for artificial sweeteners." The bees hovered. Marvin leaned toward Hazel. "Do you think they understand her?" Hazel shrugged. "Honestly, I barely understand her half the time." Granny Zip raised her crochet hook like a wand. "In exchange, we ask only that you cease your aerial assault and join us in communal revelry, or at least stay near the petunias." One bee landed on the rim of the honey dish. Another circled twice and settled on a linen napkin stitched with daisies. Granny Zip grinned. "We have an accord." Rufus blinked. That worked? Calvin looked stunned. She brokered a treaty with bees. Marvin dropped his spatula in awe. She's a legend. Granny Zip wiped her hands on her vest and straightened her badge. "Of course it worked. I speak fluent pollinator." The sun began its slow descent over the hollow as the tables were restocked, the chairs righted, and the laughter replaced the earlier shrieking. Marvin led a victory march around the green, with Hazel and Calvin trailing behind, waving what was left of the hydrangea sampler like a flag of survival. Granny Zip called for a final round of festivities. A cross-stitch relay game. Teams were formed, hoops were handed out, and shouts of "needle pass" and "mind the knot" echoed across the lawn. Penelope begrudgingly poured another round of her sparkling lemonade, muttering, "European or not, they drank it all." As the stars began to peek through the summer sky and the fireflies lit their lanterns, the hollow stitched together its final memories of the day. Granny Zip, now seated cross-legged on her picnic blanket with Gertrude parked beside her, surveyed the scene with a quiet smile. "All in a day's stitch work," she murmured. And just like that, the great Stitchwick picnic panic became another beloved chapter in hollow history. Sticky, stitched, and absolutely unforgettable. Chapter 2, Cross-Stitch Crush. Calvin Freyweather preferred his stitches like his life, precise, quiet, and without sudden color changes. A lifelong resident of Stitchwick Hollow, Calvin was known for his meticulously organized thread boxes, nervous pacing during community stitch-ins, and his refusal to start a new pattern unless he'd read the instructions 3 times and checked the floss chart with a magnifier. He lived alone in a small spotless cottage just off Petal Lane, where he stitched in the evenings with the calming sounds of Baroque flute and a lavender heat wrap around his shoulders. He wasn't exactly the town recluse. He showed up for the whip circle, volunteered at the library book sale, and once even helped repair a collapsing gazebo. But socializing made him sweat. Small talk made him stammer. And dating? That was practically an Olympic sport in overstimulation. So when Granny Zip stormed into the Stitch and Sip Cafe one muggy Thursday afternoon and announced she was launching the Summer Stitch Singles Mixer, Calvin's entire body locked up like a seized bobbin winder. "No," he said immediately, before she even opened her clipboard. "You haven't heard the pitch yet," Granny Zip replied. "Does the pitch involve human interaction?" She grinned like a thread gremlin. "Only the flirty kind." Calvin began backing toward the cafe exit. "Nope, not this time. I'm very busy with floss inventory and moth prevention." "You need to let someone in, Calvin," Granny Zip said gently, but with the force of a woman who had once mediated a 3-hour feud over metallic thread usage. "Besides, You can bring a sampler. It's not speed dating, it's speed stitching. He blinked. There's a difference? One ends in heartbreak, the other ends in backstitch. She handed him a name tag made of pink felt and glitter glue. It read, "Hi, I panic in public, but stitch in private." Calvin stared at it, then sighed, then reluctantly said, "What kind of snacks will there be?" The Stitch and Sip was transformed for the occasion. Paper lanterns shaped like pincushions hung from the rafters. Tables were set up in a horseshoe, each adorned with vintage doilies and mini embroidery hoops for the event's main activity. Stitch and Spark, a partner challenge where attendees stitched a collaborative motif while getting to know one another. There was punch. There were pedophores shaped like thread spools. There was a soundtrack of instrumental 80s ballads. And there was Calvin, sweating slightly through a linen shirt, holding a sampler that read "tidy is kind," and wishing he could crawl into the wall. Participants milled about, chatting and laughing as Granny Zip bustled around with a bell and a basket of thread bundles. Each attendee would draw a thread color and match it with someone holding the same shade. Calvin drew a tangled bit of fuchsia. "Oh no," he muttered. "Oh yes," said a voice behind him. "Looks like we're a pair." He turned to see a woman with unruly curls, ink-smudged fingers, and a canvas project bag that looked like it had survived a dragon attack. Her name tag read, "Lark. I stitch outside the lines." She held out her hoop. "This one's called Rise or Take a Nap. It's about burnout, or possibly soup. The lines are interpretive." Calvin blinked. "Is that a phoenix or a coffee mug?" "It started as one and became the other," she said cheerfully. Calvin hesitated, then sat, slowly. The Stitch and Spark challenge began. Each pair had 30 minutes to stitch something, anything, without speaking. Just thread, glances, and vibes. Calvin stitched a neat border of uniform crosses. Lark stitched a burst of color that disregarded the border entirely. He passed her a strand of muted sage. She passed him neon orange. He winced. She winked. Somehow they met in the middle with a metallic gold spiral co-stitched in harmony. When the timer dinged, their hoop revealed a heart emerging from a tangled knot of lines, messy, vibrant, and unmistakably alive. Calvin stared at it, breath caught somewhere between anxiety and awe. "I don't know what that is." Lark leaned closer. "I think it's us." Across the room, Granny Zip wiped away an emotional tear and whispered to Hazel, "I'm telling you, bees and boys, you just have to speak their language." After the event, as the lanterns dimmed and the last crumbs of fondant floss were swept away, Calvin lingered near the door, fidgeting with his sampler. Lark approached, offering him a floss tag with her number written in calligraphy. "You don't have to call," she said, "but if you do, I promise not to mock your stitch tension." He smiled, genuine, soft, nervous. "What if I laminate it?" She laughed. "Then I'll know you like me." As Calvin walked home under the lavender twilight, clutching the chaotic little hoop and the thread of something new, he felt oddly calm. Maybe, he thought, some things are worth stitching outside the lines for. Chapter 3, Scoop and Stitch, a Flavorful Feud. No one remembered exactly when the feud began. Some said it started when Stitch and Sip released its now famous summer flavor, Strawberry Sampler Swirl, and the new cafe across the green, Caffeinated Cone, responded the very next week with Espresso Edge Stitch Crunch, served in cones shaped like tiny embroidery hoops. Others claimed it had something to do with a Stitch Cross sampler displayed in the Stitch and Sip window that read Scoop, Stitch, Repeat, a slogan Caffeinated Cone insisted they'd embroidered first. Either way, by mid-July, the townsfolk of Stitchwick Hollow were split, not politically, not emotionally, but digestively. Lines curled out both shops, like stitch borders, each boasting longer waits and louder opinions. In one corner, Team Swirl, loyal to Stitch and Sip's legacy of craft and cream. In the other, Team Cone, buzzing with Gen Z stitchers, sorbet purists, and questionable thread talk flavors. At the center of it all stood Hazel Plimpton, arms folded, watching the chaos unfold from the Stitch and Sip porch with a long spoon and a longer sigh. Stitchwick has survived thread shortages, hoop controversies, and the great Adaverse linen debate of 1998, she muttered. We are not going to fall apart over gelato. From behind her, Granny Zip clinked her spoon into an empty bowl and squinted toward the rival cafe. You're right, Hazel, she said. We're not going to fall apart. Pause. We're going to stitch it out. Hazel turned. I don't like that look in your eye. It's a look of creative warfare, Granny Zip grinned. Get your thimbles ready. It's time for an ice cream stitch-off. By Monday morning, the flyers were up. The Great Ice Cream Stitch-Off, Battle of the Bites and Bobbins. 2 teams, 2 flavors, 1 stitched masterpiece. The rules were simple. Each team had to create an original cross-stitch pattern inspired by their flavor. The pattern would be stitched live on the village green during Saturday's scoop-off. Townsfolk would vote based on creativity, execution, and emotional deliciousness. Granny Zip, naturally, declared herself master of ceremonies. Hazel led Team Swirl. Her crew consisted of stitchers who favored tradition, symmetry, and dessert-themed samplers with charming cursive fonts. Caffeinated Combs' team was headed by Thalia Brew, a recent transplant from the city who wore stitchy crop tops and carried her floss in an upcycled cold brew growler. She recruited freehand embroiderers, floss painters, and one chaotic genius named Jordan who only stitched with shades of brown as a statement. By Wednesday, the green was filled with tension and tulle. Each team had erected a tent. Team Swirl's side smelled like vanilla and strawberry glaze. Team Cone's side smelled like espresso and ambition. Lady Threadle arrived on Thursday morning, fashionably late and outrageously overdressed in a vintage gown with appliqued sprinkles and a fascinator shaped like a waffle cone. I shall be Switzerland, she declared, to no one in particular, a neutral observer of flavor and flair. She set up a chaise lounge at the halfway point between the tents and was promptly adopted as the official stitch-off commentator, providing color commentary in real time with a parasol and a megaphone. Team Swirl leads in elegance, but Team Cone has audacity in spades, she announced to a group of bewildered toddlers eating push-pops. Ah, Jordan just added a satin-stitch espresso bean the size of a chihuahua. Brava! Calvin Freyweather walked the perimeter nervously, unsure which team to join. Well, they both have charts, he whispered to himself, but one has glitter floss. Granny Zip appeared beside him, sipping from a cone-shaped mug. Follow your gut, kid. I don't trust my gut. My gut just wants ice cream. That's how most important decisions start. Calvin eventually sat on Team Swirl's side, drawn to Hazel's structured approach and the promise of clean backstitching. Across the field, Thalia raised her hands. Team Cone, we stitch at dawn. Jordan misheard and threw a fistful of sequins in the air. Viva la flavor! Hazel sighed and tightened her hoop, and thus the stage was set. Saturday arrived with a breeze that smelled faintly of sugar cones and ambition. Granny Zip took her place at the judging table beneath a striped umbrella, armed with a clipboard, a megaphone, and a triple scoop of both flavors. Lady Threadle reclined with opera glasses and a notebook titled Hoop Drama, Observations in DMC and Dairy. Needles up, Granny Zip called. Stitch off begins in 3, 2, 1. Music played. Ice cream churned in vintage machines nearby, and the teams began. Hazel's side worked like a perfectly tuned metronome. Neat borders, delicate strawberries, a stitch sundae dish that gleamed with careful satin stitch. Across the way, Team Cone was a glorious mess. Talia painted their canvas in espresso tones. Jordan added jagged motifs of swirling steam and chaotic button clusters. Someone stitched a quote that simply read, caffeine before cross-stitch. Townsfolk wandered through, eating cones and peeking at the progress. Debates broke out. Floss was shared. Marvin attempted to start a betting pool but got distracted by a drop scoop of butter pecan. And in the final hour, something unexpected happened. Hazel looked over at Talia's canvas and, though she would never admit it out loud, smiled. It was wild, unruly, a little unhinged, but it was also joyful. Without saying a word, she pulled a strand of metallic espresso brown from her kit and stitched a swirl of it in the background of her own team's sampler. Talia, catching the gesture, laughed. She stitched a single perfect strawberry just outside the bounds of her team's canvas. Lady Threadle clutched her pearls. A crossover! A collaboration! A stitchy truce! Someone, bring me a tissue! Granny Zip stood and raised her arms. That's it, folks. Hoops down. The crowd applauded. Both samplers were displayed side by side, and instead of choosing one, the town voted to hang them both in the library summer exhibit. Flavors of Stitchwick, Threads of the Season. Later, as the sun melted behind the hills, the two teams sat together on the green, sharing spoons and stories. Turns out, Hazel said, licking a bit of strawberry swirl from her thumb, there's room in this town for a little chaos. Talia clinked her cone against hers. And a lot of sugar. Lady Threadle dabbed her eyes with a monogram napkin. I haven't felt this moved since the stitching that reunited Pearl and Pearl. Granny Zip sighed happily, patting her belly. And that, my friends, is how you stitch peace, with a scoop in one hand and a hoop in the other. Chapter 4. Rainy Day Roundtable. One whip or many. It was the sort of summer rain that arrived unannounced, bold and unbothered, thundering down on the cobbled streets of Stitchwick Hollow in sheets so thick they blurred the gingham awnings and made the hanging flower baskets sway like sea anemones. The warm scent of wet earth mingled with the sugary perfume of soaked peonies and the faint bitterness of damp pavement. Thunder murmured in the distance like an old man clearing his throat, and the rain sang on every rooftop in polyrhythmic applause. Inside the Stitch and Sip, however, it was a different season entirely. The windows fogged with contentment, and the hiss of the espresso machine harmonized with the soft scrape of wooden chairs. A trio of beeswax candles flickered on the long communal table, their golden light dancing across half-drunk teacups and the occasional puddle of runaway floss. A breeze from the cracked window carried the scent of vanilla chai and rain-drenched lavender. Lady Threadle, ever elegant in gumboots and a shawl embroidered with miniature hedgehogs, leaned forward with a knowing gleam in her eye. Some say fidelity is for lovers and fools, she began, fingering a half-stitched bookmark shaped like a swordfish. But I say it applies just as well to stitches. One project at a time. Anything else is chaos in a hoop. Hazel Plimpton snorted delicately into her buttered scone, says the woman who once had a handkerchief sampler in every drawer of her chifforobe. Across from her, Granny Zip cackled into her vanilla chai, the steam rising into her tea's silver curls like a halo made of sass. She was wearing a leather vest covered in mismatched buttons and pun patches, thready or not, in stitches since '65, and her project bag, shaped like a raccoon, was shedding a trail of floss like breadcrumbs. I was monogamous once, Zip declared, back in '84. It lasted about 3 weeks, and then I found out you could stitch and quilt and do macrame without your fingers falling off. Changed my life. A few other regulars had taken refuge from the downpour as well. Calvin Freyweather hunched sheepishly over a mermaid biscornu, trying to look like he wasn't tracking every word Lady Threadle said. Pearl Podmore, working simultaneously on 2 different floral alphabets and sneaking lemon drops from her notions pouch. And Linwood Greeley, furrowing his brow as he stitched a gnarled oak tree on storm gray linen. the metaphor of it not lost on anyone. Hazel wiped her fingers on a napkin and turned to the group. So, what do we think? Is stitching one project at a time a mark of discipline or denial? A rumble of thunder punctuated the question, followed by a dramatic bolt of lightning that silhouetted the teapot display in the window. The debate was about to begin. Granny Zip didn't even wait for applause. She snapped open her raccoon project bag with a flourish. I brought 4 projects today. 1 for focus, 1 for fun, 1 for my wrists when they get cranky, and 1 that I'm ignoring out of spite. Sounds like a commitment issue, Lady Threadle replied crisply, eyes narrowed over her cat eye reading glasses. If you stitched fewer pieces, you might finish more than, say, your sentences. Hazel winced and whispered, ooh, behind her mug of raspberry tea. Calvin blinked rapidly, unsure whether to be alarmed or impressed. I finished plenty, Granny Zip shot back, fluffing out her thread-covered vest like a peacock in protest. I just don't see the point in forcing fidelity on Floss. Sometimes a stitcher needs variety. Spice. A little summer fling with a Halloween pattern, if you catch my drift. Pearl Podmore chimed in with a sing-song voice. They say variety is the stitch of life. That's the spice of life, dear, Lady Threadle corrected. Pearl shrugged. Same difference. I'm working on spring, summer, autumn, and winter all at once. It keeps the seasons in balance. Linwood, who'd been quiet thus far, cleared his throat. I do 1 at a time. All heads turned. Lady Threadle beamed. Thank you, Linwood. See? A stitcher of character. He held up his stormy oak. Well, technically, I do 1 at a time because I lost the chart for the other one. There was a beat of silence, and then Granny Zip howled with laughter so hard she had to dab her eyes with a threadbare napkin. Classic hollow behavior, she wheezed. You're in the club, whether you like it or not. Lady Threadle looked as if she'd just stepped in a puddle of wet floss. I simply don't understand how anyone keeps track of all the counting and the floss. It's chaos. You're courting tangles. Hazel leaned forward. Some of us like the chaos. I keep 3 whips going. 1 in the morning with coffee, 1 during lunch break at the boutique, and 1 for winding down before bed. They each have a different mood. Exactly, Calvin said quietly, surprising everyone. It's like playlists. 1 for focus, 1 for comfort, 1 for when you're sad and you don't know why. Lady Threadle stiffened, then gave a delicate sigh. Perhaps I've been overcommitted to undercommitting. She looked down at her swordfish bookmark and brushed a stray thread from its fin. But I still believe there's honor in loyalty. 1 piece, 1 journey. You live inside it longer. Let it shape you. Granny Zip softened just a little. You know what, Threadle? That's fair. Not everyone needs to roll around in half-finished projects like a hedgehog in a floss nest. Hazel nodded. Maybe it's not about how many you start. It's about how you feel about each one. Are you escaping or are you exploring? Lady Threadle folded her project back into its pouch. I am loyal to this bookmark. I've stitched it 4 times already. I give them to anyone who finishes a Tolstoy novel. Zip muttered, So, no one? They all laughed. Outside, the rain softened, shifting from furious applause to a quiet patter like someone thoughtfully tapping a drum with padded fingers. The cafe lights glowed a little warmer. Somewhere behind the counter, a fresh batch of lemon poppy seed muffins was rising in the oven, and the round table of thread and thunder, a dozen projects, monogamous or not, moved forward 1 gentle stitch at a time. Chapter 5, A Stitch in Time for the Solstice. The sun lingered longer than usual over Stitchwick Hollow, casting a honeyed glow on every gable, garden, and window box as the summer solstice approached. The townsfolk bustled with anticipation for the annual solstice pageant, a whimsical patchwork performance held outdoors beneath the wide lawn of Elderflower Hill, timed to end just as the full moon rose over the orchard. This year's production, The Ballad of the Threaded Grove, an odd little fairy tale about a mystical forest where trees whispered in cross-stitch and every stitcher had to prove their worth to earn their needle's shine. But with just 3 days to go, disaster struck. Mona Silkley, the troupe's prickly costume designer, had taken ill with a sudden case of dramatic exhaustion. Read. She stormed off after someone said her embroidered capes were a bit much. Without her, the costumes were nothing but pinned muslins and fabric piles labeled "Maybe a Squirrel?" Enter Hazel Plimpton and the Stitchwick Whip Circle. "It'll be fine," Hazel said, clutching a clipboard and trying to believe herself. "We're creative, resourceful, and deeply accustomed to chaos." Granny Zip squinted up at the sky. "We've stitched under pressure before. Remember the button shortage of '09? "No one remembers that but you," muttered Linwood, holding a half-finished cloak that appeared to be made from old Ada scraps. "Still counts," Zip said, shoving a basket of miscellaneous trimmings towards Lady Threadle. "Here, you're in charge of Ethereal Enchantress meets Lunar Druid. Go wild." Lady Threadle sniffed. "I don't go wild. I go intentional." Hazel flipped a page on her clipboard. "We'll need at least 8 costumes by Moonrise Saturday. That includes 2 forest guardians, 1 prophetic mushroom, 1 thread spirit, and whatever this is." She held up a sketch of a character simply labeled the Bobbin Oracle. Pearl Podmore clapped with delight. "Ooh, can I be the mushroom?" "No," said the other Pearl flatly. "You'd take it too seriously." "And you wouldn't take it seriously enough." Hazel ignored them both. "We'll build from our unfinished projects. Whatever you've got, half-stitch sleeves, miscounted motifs, abandoned borders, we'll use it. This isn't about perfection, it's about spirit." "Spirit and salvage," Linwood muttered. By Friday morning, the Stitch and Sip looked like a haberdashery had exploded. Linen scraps fluttered from lampshades. Piles of tangled floss spilled like spaghetti across the floor. Someone had converted the pastry case into a makeshift dye station using beets, black tea, and an ill-fated attempt at turmeric. Granny Zip's wardrobe rack was a laundry line strung from one ficus to another, where damp tunics and stitched sashes swayed beside a single unexplainable tutu. Outside, the Elderflower Hill stage took shape beneath a rising crescent of folding chairs and hanging lanterns. The entire event was timed to climax at moonrise on Saturday, when the solstice full moon would bathe the hill in silvery light, bright enough to perform without a single spotlight. The moon had always been part of the pageant's magic. It made the performance feel ancient, dreamy, a little surreal. But the full moon also brought challenges. For one thing, it meant the show started late, nearly 9:15 p.m., after the sun had finally slid behind the hills. That left an audience full of yawning children, nervous actors whispering lines in the dark, and stitchers cross-referencing costume changes by candlelight. And the moment the moon cleared the orchard, every June bug in the hollow came to watch. "Do not panic," Hazel hissed from backstage, slapping away a moth the size of a biscuit. "It's atmospheric." Lady Threadle stood nearby in a robe made of reclaimed sampler borders, stiffly adjusting her moonstone tiara. "Atmosphere does not excuse bugs in my bustle." Meanwhile, Linwood's tree bark tunic, stitched from 5 failed pillow fronts, was sagging under the weight of dew. "I think I'm molding." "You're evolving," Granny Zip said encouragingly, then shoved a glow-in-the-dark floss garland into his hands. "Here, you're a magical grove now." Backstage was chaos, but onstage, pure moonlit wonder. The pageant unfolded in strange, charming vignettes. each more dreamlike than the last. The prophetic mushroom, Pearl, who did get the role, wore a bell-shaped felt hat with stitch spores and made up all of her lines in rhyme. Hazel played the thread spirit in a swirling cloak of frogged linen and miscounted motifs, whispering blessings and soft backstitch. And when Lady Threadle stepped into the clearing to deliver the final monologue, her robe catching the moonlight like silver thread, there was a hush so complete it felt stitched in place. "In the grove, we are all unfinished," she said, eyes gleaming. "Each of us is a pattern in progress. The moon does not judge the crooked line. The thread finds its own way." The crowd exhaled. A breeze lifted through the field, and the moon, full and radiant, shone down on every floss-frayed hem, every uneven seam, every stitcher seated beneath the stars, flawed and glowing. Chapter 6. Stretch, Sip, and Regret Nothing. The morning after the solstice pageant dawned entirely too bright. Stitchwick Hollow lay in a collective state of gentle ruin. Sunburned décolletages, glitter in unmentionable places, and a suspicious trail of lemon bars leading from Elderflower Hill to the Stitch and Sip's back door. Hazel Plimpton arrived at the cafe bleary-eyed, still wearing one moon-shaped earring and a shawl she was pretty sure had been used as a prop mushroom cape. Inside, the usual scent of cinnamon scones had been replaced with something vegetal and alarming: cucumber mint linen spray and a faint whiff of tiger balm. A wooden sign rested beside a pitcher of lemon water. Post-solstice rejuvenation yoga. Restore your stitcher spine. Begins at 10:17 a.m. or whenever everyone stops groaning. Granny Zip limped in, muttering, "I swear on my embroidery scissors, if this is one of those quiet breathing things, I'm out. My ribs are still vibrating from that interpretive thread dance." Lady Threadle breezed past her, wearing a kimono with luminous satin stitch mandalas spread across the back like a stitch starburst. "Darling, we all saw you floss lasso the bobbin oracle during the curtain call." "I regret nothing," said Zip, lowering herself onto a yoga mat with a grunt that sounded like an angry kettle. Hazel looked around the room, noting Linwood Greeley trying to stretch discreetly behind a potted fern, Calvin Freyweather sipping bone broth like it was a healing elixir, Pearl and Pearl Podmore attempting to double downward dog and nearly toppling a floor lamp. "All right," Hazel clapped her hands. "Welcome to Stitch and Stretch, a gentle grounding movement session for those who stitched too hard, celebrated too freely, or inexplicably woke up with floss wrapped around both ankles." "Check," Zip muttered. "We'll start with wrist circles," Hazel said. "Let's be mindful. Be present. And if something hurts, please stop and pretend it doesn't." "Now we'll move into cat-cow pose," Hazel instructed, kneeling at the front. "Arch your back like an elegant feline, then round it like you're frogging 2 hours of work and trying not to scream." Linwood raised a hand. "What if my cat-cow looks more like a collapsed shelf?" "Excellent form," Hazel replied encouragingly. Zip groaned. "I swear I just heard my spine say, oops." Pearl whispered, "I can feel last night's lemonade in my knees." The other Pearl whispered back, "That's not where lemonade goes." At last, Hazel invited everyone into Savasana. Lay flat on your backs, arms spread out like abandoned stitch diagrams. "Let go," she intoned. "Let go of judgment. Let go of tension. Let go of the fact that you used a glue stick instead of interfacing." Lady Threadle opened one eye. "I knew someone used a glue stick." Zip mumbled, "Worked, didn't it?" There was a long sigh-filled silence, broken only by the soft click of Linwood accidentally turning a floss winder on in his pocket. Just as the group began rolling up their mats and reaching for scones with newfound flexibility, Linwood, who had valiantly participated in every pose despite a suspicious crinkling noise from his back, stood up to retrieve his tea. He had worn what he claimed was a stitched meditation wrap, but to which everyone else knew was just his monogram bathrobe with a few thread motifs on the cuffs. As he reached overhead for a mug on the high shelf, the belt gave way. There stood Linwood, blinking in the full late morning sunshine, his robe completely open, revealing that he had, in a tragic lapse of judgment, foregone any and all undergarments. Pearl gasped. The other Pearl shrieked. Lady Threadle dropped her mug. Hazel blinked once, then twice. And Granny Zip? Granny Zip gave Linwood a cheeky once-over, her expression equal parts admiration and appraisal. "Well," she said, tilting her head. "Good morning, Linwood." Framed by a window full of sunflowers and scandal, he froze like a deer in the headlight. Hazel spun around and threw a yoga blanket with the speed of someone diffusing a Stitch-related crisis. And Savasana is over. Linwood fumbled the robe closed, mortified. "I thought I double knotted." "You most certainly did not," muttered Lady Threadle, fanning herself with a pattern chart. Hazel covered her eyes. "This was supposed to be restorative." Granny Zip continued to sip her tea unbothered. "I don't know about the rest of you, but I feel very restored." Linwood, red-faced but oddly dignified, straightened. "Well, at least I didn't knock over the lemon water." A long pause, then a snort, then another. Then the entire group erupted into laughter, cracked, cathartic, teary-eyed laughter that rang out through the cafe and drifted into the street like bells on the breeze. Chapter 7. Threadstock Comes to Town. It started with a creak. Not the usual kind from Calvin Freyweather's office chair, which groaned like a disgruntled accordion every time he reached for his planner. This creak came from the grand wooden doors of Stitchwick Hollow's town hall, thrown open with theatrical gusto by Hazel Plimpton, who had just sprinted up the front steps, holding an envelope over her head like a golden ticket. "They picked us!" she shouted. Inside, a half-hearted committee meeting ground to a halt. "Picked us for what?" asked Calvin, eyeing her cautiously over the rim of his chamomile tea. Hazel smacked the envelope onto the table. "Threadstock!" For a moment, no one spoke. Then Linwood Greeley dropped his knitting needle. Granny Zip, who had been lounging in the back pew with her boots up on a town ordinance binder, let out a low whistle. "Threadstock?" Calvin repeated, voice rising half an octave. "As in the Threadstock? The traveling international stitching festival that rotates locations every summer? That Threadstock?" Hazel nodded, glowing. "We're hosting it this year. In 2 weeks. Calvin fainted, only briefly, though. The next 10 days unraveled like a tangled skein in a toddler's hands. Calvin, still reeling from being voted festival coordinator by a highly questionable everyone point at Calvin method, spent his mornings buried under permit applications and floss safety guidelines. The official Threadstock welcome packet included everything from emergency embroidery floss color coding systems, DMC 666 required its own fire extinguisher apparently, to a map of the sacred stitching circle ceremony, which needed to be stitched into the turf using echo-dyed rope before the first sunrise of festival day. "I didn't even know we had sacred turf," he muttered. "We don't," said Hazel, "but we do have Pearl's cousin's sheep field, and that's close enough." Meanwhile, Pearl and Pearl had been assigned hospitality and lodging, which quickly escalated into passive-aggressive flyer wars. Pearl posted signs reading "Authentic Stitchwick B&B Experience, linens washed by hand," and the other Pearl countered with "We have air conditioning." Into this chaos swept Lady Threadle like a parade float with an opinion. She arrived at the first planning meeting in a ruffled organza cape adorned with applique fig leaves and declared herself creative director of visual continuity and vibe. No one had appointed her, but no one objected either. "My role," she explained, gesturing with a clipboard made of painted balsa wood, "is to ensure the festival aesthetic captures both Stitchwick's rustic whimsy and international textile glamour. Think cottage core goes on a spiritual retreat in Tuscany." Her first decree, a color scheme. "Threadstock teal, bobbin beige and emotional plum, she said. Absolutely no red. It's far too decisive. Granny Zip tried to argue, but was distracted by the appearance of festival chic staff uniforms designed by Hazel with fringe so long it caught on doorknobs. Linwood, determined to contribute, disappeared into the archives and emerged 3 days later with a tea-stained sampler from 1891, stitched by Beatrice Thimblewhite herself. It read, "If you must host, host with heart. Serve tea, laugh often, leave space for the strange." "Could be our festival motto," he said, presenting it like a relic from the gods. Hazel nodded. "It's perfect." Calvin, who had just tripped over a crate of unapproved glitter glue, looked unconvinced. Lady Threadle sighed with delight. "Oh, I do love when text and thread combine into wisdom." Despite the chaos, the town transformed. The Stitch and Sip Cafe became festival headquarters, its windows strung with floss bunting and a sign that read, "Thread stock. Welcome, weirdos." Vendors trickled in from neighboring towns and distant cities, bringing carts full of hand-dyed threads, vintage hoops, and biscuit-shaped needle minders. A massive mystery sculpture, an oversized wooden embroidery hoop carved with the words, "Stitch where you stand," arrived on the town green without explanation. Lady Threadle immediately adorned it with silk flower garlands and a hand-lettered sign, "Please do not climb unless it's for love." Granny Zip declared it aesthetic nonsense and then knit a cozy for the base. At night, exhausted committee members collapsed into chairs at the cafe, swapping stories and sipping lavender lemonade. Even Calvin started to smile. "We may actually pull this off," he murmured one evening, looking around the twinkling lights and fabric-draped fences. Zip raised an eyebrow. "Of course we'll pull it off," she said. "We're Stitchwick Hollow. We once hosted a wedding, a quilting bee, and a goat rescue in the same afternoon. Threadstock doesn't stand a chance." Lady Threadle toasted with her rose gold travel tumbler. "To strange stitches and second chances." The morning of the festival dawned crisp and golden. As the town stirred, a hush fell, not of panic, but anticipation. Stalls stood ready, bunting fluttered, and the sacred stitching circle, roughly approximated in wool rope and optimism, shimmered in the dew. And in the quiet moment before the first visitor arrived, Hazel glanced around at the mismatched, marvelous little town she called home. "Leave space for the strange," she whispered, smiling. She had a feeling they were about to need it. Chapter 8. Return of the Rogue Stitcher. The sun hung heavy over Stitchwick Hollow as day 2 of the Threadstock Festival rolled into full swing. Embroidered pennants fluttered on laundry lines strung between booths. Children raced with hoop skirts trailing like parachutes. A faint aroma of kettle corn and sun-warmed linen floated through the green. At center stage, Granny Zip was in her glory. She stood atop the stitching podium in leather sandals and a crop denim vest covered in punny patches. "Floss Boss," "Count on Me," and "Stitch Happens." Gertrude, her cherry red motorcycle, was parked proudly behind her like a steed awaiting its queen. "All right, you human pincushions," she barked cheerfully into the mic. "If you can't thread a needle in under 5 seconds, you don't deserve a seat at my table. Unless you bribe me with lemon bars." The crowd howled. "Next up in the speedy sampler relay, we've got the Crimson Cardinals versus the French Knot Fiends. On my count." And then she saw him. Leaning casually against a post near the cider stand was a man who looked like he'd walked out of the past and a particularly cheeky knitting calendar. A patchwork duster coat trailed around his boots. A silver embroidery scissor pendant gleamed against his chest. His graying hair was tucked behind one ear in the same roguish way it had always been. Felix Vane. Granny Zip's needle slipped for the first time in years. He grinned. Of course he grinned. And gave a small bow. The crowd, oblivious, cheered for someone finishing a row of lightning-fast satin stitches. Zip narrowed her eyes. "Well, well," she said into her mic, her voice dry as unbuttered toast. "If it isn't the rogue stitcher himself. Everyone, hide your bobbins. Heads turned. Murmurs passed like a ripple over the green. Felix strolled forward, hands in his coat pockets, smiling like someone arriving fashionably late to his own legend. I heard you were still heckling crowds, he said. I had to see it in person. The crowd laughed, unsure whether this was part of the act. Didn't you have somewhere to be? She asked, one eyebrow arched. Turns out, he said, I might have already been where I was supposed to be. Lady Threadle, perched nearby on a canvas-backed camp chair embroidered with her own monogram in gold thread, lowered her opera glasses. Oh, she whispered to no one in particular, the thread that got away is trying to stitch himself back in. Then louder, and pointedly toward Pearl and Pearl, who stood slack-jawed by the crocheted lemonade stand. If this turns into a public declaration, someone hand me my shawl. I want to swoon correctly. Pearl muttered, he looks taller in person. The other Pearl said, he looks guilty. They found themselves backstage half an hour later behind a curtain of stitched bunting and a row of wooden hoops painted with old festival slogans. Felix leaned against a crate labeled Emergency Floss. Zip kept her arms crossed. You always did know how to make an entrance, she said. And I always ruined the exit, he replied. Silence threaded between them like old floss, faded, a little tangled, but not yet snapped. I read something recently, he began, about how even the most perfect stitching can be soulless if it doesn't bleed a little. Zip blinked. My last exhibit, he continued, was called Sterile Elegance. A critic called it a master class in hollow perfection. I laughed until I realized they were right. All those years traveling, refining, demonstrating, there wasn't one stitch left in me that meant anything. He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded flyer. Stitchwick Hollow's first harvest stitch-off, 88. Zip's handwriting was scrawled on the back. You stitch this for intention. Try love next time. I kept it, he said softly, and I think I finally know what it means. She didn't respond. I'm not here to win you back, he said. Not exactly. I'm here because I needed to remember how it felt to make something that mattered. And you, Zinnia, you always mattered. Zip stared at him, unreadable. Don't get sentimental on me, Vane, she said finally. You'll scare off the children. They entered the blindfold Biscornu bout as last-minute partners, a pairing that caused quite the buzz. Felix fumbled on the second seam. Zip steadied his hand without comment. His backstitch wobbled on the fourth panel. She quietly rethreaded his needle. They won by a single stitch. From the sidelines, Lady Threadle dabbed at her eyes with a floral pocket square. A Biscornu of reconciliation. My heart can barely handle it. Later that evening, as twilight painted the festival in soft amber light, they sat together at a picnic bench strung with solar fairy lights. The rest of the crowd was busy at the embroidery jam session tent. Felix placed a blank square of linen on the table between them. I never started a new sampler after I left here, he said. Why not? Because I didn't know what to say. She reached into her vest pocket and set a small tarnished thimble down beside it. One he'd given her once, long ago, back when giving a thimble still meant something. Well, she said, maybe you say something now. He hesitated. I was hoping, he said, maybe we could stitch something together? Zip looked at him, not just at his face, but at his hands, slightly unsteady now, at his scissor pendant dulled at the edges, at the way he still waited for permission before opening his heart. I don't know, she said. He didn't flinch. I've built something here, she said, motioning vaguely towards the tents, the people, the crooked little town. A life. A loud, unruly, beautiful one. It took me years to stop measuring everything by the shape you left behind. Felix nodded slowly. I don't know that I want to stitch someone else into it. Not at this stage. She touched the fabric, then pulled her hand away. But I'll think about it. He smiled, tired and real. That's more than I expected. They sat a while longer as the music swelled from the jam tent. Someone played a too slow version of You're So Fine, You Blew My Mind, You Dropped a Stitch. Zip chuckled. Felix laughed too. The linen stayed on the table, untouched between them, and the stars began to come out. Chapter 9. The Last Stitch of Summer. The first breeze of fall arrived early. It wasn't much, just a rustle through the maple outside the Stitch and Sip Cafe, a few dry leaves chasing each other across the cobblestones like gossiping cousins. But those who paid attention, especially the stitchers of Stitchwick Hollow, felt the shift. It was the kind of breeze that made you tuck a cardigan into your basket, just in case. The kind that made the air smell a little more like cinnamon and a little less like sunshine. That evening, without much discussion, the whip circle drifted onto the porch of the cafe for what would become the unofficial, unplanned, and utterly necessary final stitch night of summer. No one set invitations. No one chose a theme. They just showed up. Granny Zip arrived first, her boots up on a stool, a canvas tote by her side, filled not with a project, but with tools, scissors, thimbles, thread conditioners, and a small tin labeled sharp enough to split the truth. She didn't pull out any stitching of her own. Tonight's for mending, she said, rubbing a needle across a whetstone. Doesn't always mean fabric. Calvin arrived next, cautiously carrying a pale gray hoop with exactly 4 stitch clouds and 1 half-hearted lightning bolt. He sat near the edge of the group as if afraid the breeze might knock him back inside. Lady Threadle swept in fashionably late, draped in a layered tunic made of linen and early autumn tweed, with a scarf embroidered in tiny apples, pears, and ambiguous seasonal fruit. I'm stitching closure, she announced, settling into her seat with a dramatic sigh. It takes the shape of plum preserves tonight. Pearl and Pearl came together, unusually quiet, until they revealed their shared project, 2 halves of a heart-shaped sampler. Pearl's half read, You drive me crazy. The other Pearl's side answered, But I'd still stitch beside you. I did the punctuation, Pearl sniffed. You mean you did the uneven border, the other Pearl replied. You asked for an uneven border. Granny Zip held up a pair of snips like a referee's whistle. They bickered less after that. Felix appeared a little before dusk with a canvas roll under one arm and a thermos of tea in the other. He chose a corner seat, unrolled a faded work in progress stitched in forest greens and blues, and began pulling out threads one by one. He didn't speak much, but when Zip passed him with a sharper pair of scissors, he met her eyes and gave a small wordless nod. It was enough. Hazel arrived last, her usual notebook replaced with a tiny linen scrap she'd stitched with a single phrase. Still here. She didn't explain it. She didn't need to. As the sun dipped low, shadows stretched across the porch. No one mentioned the shorter days. No one lamented the season ending. They just stitched. Some finished projects, some didn't. Calvin, for the first time, let someone else look at his work without apology. It's meant to be messy, he said. It's the inside of my head. Lady Threadle leaned over and whispered, Darling, then your brain is wildly conceptual and deeply emotive. I adore it. Granny Zip handed out hard candies. Pearl lit a candle that smelled vaguely of nutmeg and old books. The other Pearl pulled a blanket across her lap and didn't offer to share it, so Pearl scooted closer without asking. The air cooled. The candle flickered. Someone hummed a tune with no name. There were no speeches, no final declarations, just the steady rhythm of needles moving through fabric. the soft scuff of chairs on wood, and the quiet, patient sound of summer letting go. And the town, stitched together by memory and thread, began to welcome the fall. The end. Epilogue from the porch swing of Antonia Florence. Thank you for spending your summer in Stitchwick Hollow. This book began, as many things do around here, with a half-stitched idea and a cup of something iced. I didn't know exactly what it would become, only that I wanted to spend a little more time in a place where creativity is messy, friendships are stitched in fits and starts, and every project, finished or not, has a story behind it. Summer is a peculiar season for stitching. The light is generous, but the days slip through our fingers. There are bugs and breezes and sudden thunderstorms. And yet we keep on stitching, on porches, in parks, poolside, or beneath ceiling fans that can barely keep up, because it connects us to something slower, something softer. Each of these stories was inspired by real stitchers I've known and the imaginary ones I wish I could sit beside. If you saw a bit of yourself in Calvin's anxious optimism, Lady Threadle's theatrical flair, Granny Zip's stubborn wisdom, or Pearl and Pearl's lovingly stitched chaos, then you're in good company. You belong here. So here's to the whips we carry from season to season, to the floss we untangle and the friendships we knot together, and to you who, like all good stitchers, knows that the real joy isn't in finishing, it's in the stitching. Until next story, with love, Antonia Florence.
So I started and finished these projects in 2015 for the project that I made for my mom, and then I finished mine in 2016. So let's take a look at my mom's gift. So I'm gonna just put it up here. And so this is a beaded cuff, and I made this using different like semi-precious stones that I epoxied to a piece of like a heavy beading backing. I don't know how else to describe it, but it's kind of rough. It's a little bit sandpapery with a felt over it, so that it can keep its shape against the weight of all the beads. So I use different semi-precious stones that I ordered from Rio Grande, the online jewelry supply store. And then I also had a whole bunch of glass beads. And what I did was I just placed all of the stones in a manner that looked kind of pleasing to me. And then after I placed them and epoxied them down, I let them sit overnight. And then I spent, the next amount of time just working on just beading around each of the stones. And I just let the pattern, take me wherever. I just kept going around and around and around. And then when I ran out of space, I'd kind of, go in a different direction. And when I ran out of thread, then I would start with a different bead. And I just kind of kept going and going and let it be kind of like a meditative process that was just guided by what felt right and what looked pretty in the moment. And then at the end of it, I added some special embellishments, like I have a little antique heirloom button that has rhinestones on it. I'll show you in the version that I made myself, because that version I have the physical project still with me. So this is the beaded cuff that I made for myself. Let me see if I can show you that. And some of it, maybe it's easier this way. Ooh, it'd make like a pretty tiara. Anyway, so trying to not get washed out by the light. Okay, maybe this is the best I can do. So I used the same method for this. I just had a different color scheme. I epoxied down all the different stones. So there are moonstones. There is this one. I'm going to show you the druzy stone. Let me find it. Oh, here it is. So this one is a druzy quartz. This one is a mother of pearl. We have something called Amazonite, I think. There are moonstones like there, some turquoise like this one, the turquoise. And then again, once I epoxied down the stones, then I just kind of beat it around and around and around, just kind of letting my heart guide me through this one, and just kind of got lost in all the swirls and just all the sparkle. And then at the end, I added some little embellishments for flair. So this is the little antique or heirloom button that I was talking about, and I purchased that when I lived in New York City. There was a little store on the Upper East Side. I think it was just called Just Buttons. I'll try to, when I upload this, I'll try to get the right name, but it was a store that was this tiny little magical store, and all they had were buttons, like drawers and drawers of buttons. And in one of them there were these little buttons that it's just all beautiful little rhinestones. And I had originally bought them because I used them on, I was really into sewing for a while, and I used them for a little like Chanel style jacket that I had made, that I'll show that in another video. And I needed some buttons for the cuff, and I needed something really, really special. So I got a bunch of these, and then I had some extras, and I just thought this project would be just perfect to add them. I think I still have some to this day that I can use again for some other projects. But yeah, these beaded cuffs, I love the process of making them. Didn't take that long. I would say this is probably like 30 hours of work. And I'll show you the back. So back, it's like, what is it? It's like a suede. I'd say it's like a suede. So maybe what did I do? I think I added the suede over the mat that I sewed the beads on. And this is all done with, all the beading was sewn on. And then I just added some snaps, and so that like snaps together, and this is kind of what it looks like. Let's see if I can show you what it looks like on me. Uh-oh, ooh, a bead just fell off. All right, I'm not gonna mess with that now. But yeah, so this is it. This is my little beaded cuff. So I don't know, should I get back to doing some more projects like this summer? Let me know in the comments. I had a wonderful time hanging out with you all today, and I hope that your summer stitching is off to a great start, and I wish everyone a wonderful day or a wonderful evening, depending on when you're tuning in, and just go out there and have so much fun working on all your projects, and just get lost in the fantasy world that you're creating with your stitches. All right, see you next time.